So welcome back. We are in the Nefesh HaHaim Sha'ar Dalet, which is about Torah Lishma, and we're going to begin tonight. HaHaim Velashner is going to talk, I think, mostly about what Torah Lishma is not. So let's see. Inyan Asika Torah Lishma. And remember, his complaint was that for the recent historical period, people were learning Sifrei Musar and Sifrei Yira, but not enough of the hardcore Torah of learning Gemara, Shitoisis, and so forth. So Inyan Asika Torah Lishma Ha'emes Habarur Ki Lishma Ein Perusho Dvekus. Okay, so we have a really interesting concept here. The relationship between Torah study, which is an intellectual activity, and a religious devotional activity. So I think maybe last time I said it, a difference between service of the heart and a service of the mind. And so he begins by saying that some people say, and this is not true, that lishma, learning Torah lishma, people might think it means dvekus, clinging to God. So using Torah study, which is an intellectual pursuit, but as a conduit to grow in one's feelings of closeness to God. And he says, Kamosha soivrim ata roiva oilam. This is the common misunderstanding of Torah lishma, that people are learning Torah to get dvekus. And now dvekus is a wonderful thing, and we are pro dvekus. We're not anti dvekus, but there's an important and a fine point, and I'm going to get this is a spoiler for the next chapter, and you know what the Nefesh HaHaim is, the point he's building is that Torah lishma means Torah for its own sake, understanding the Torah because the Torah is the will of God. And so it's not for you to get closer and to grow in your religiosity. Your job is to learn the Torah for the Torah's sake. Okay? Good evening, Steve. Nice to have you with us. We're defining Torah lishma, and we're starting with what it's not. And what it's not is dvekus. Even though most people think that in Rav Chaim Volozhin's time, and again, we can picture the Hasidim thinking that. If we would, in the broadest strokes, we think of the Litvaks as being cold intellectuals, and we think of the Hasidim as having a varam hearts, as having a warm heart, right? So using the Torah to warm your heart and get close to God is missing the point, okay? That is not Torah Lishma, to create dvekus, clinging to God. Sha'ar, and now he'll go to prove it. Sha'ar Amru Razal, the Midrash Shabikesh David HaMelech Alav Shalom Ilefanav Yizbarach Sha'oisik b'Tehillim. Okay, a person saying Tehillim. Yechashev etzlo Yitbarach Ki'ilu Haya Oisik b'Negoyim v'Oihalos. Okay, so Negoyim and Ohalos are like a Talmudic expression. Of course, it's the name of two tractates, Negoyim and Ohalos, and they're in Taharos, and they're really complicated and tricky. And so who really gets to that and who really learns it? It's known to be complex and with a lot of minutiae. And so it's an expression for like advanced calculus, advanced, Torah study. And so David HaMelech asked that his composition of the book of Psalms should be such that when people read the Psalms, it should be as if they were involved in the most advanced cerebral intellectual activity of learning Negoyim v'Ohalos. That was his request. So from the very request, we see that saying Tehillim is not on the level of studying the Torah, and David is asking that it should be considered like that from God's perspective. Haresha Asik Behilchois Hashas. So learning the halachas of the Gemara, Be'iyun Be'yagia, with great intellectual penetrative analysis. Hu inyan yoiser na'aleve ahuv lefanav yisbarach mi'amirat tehillim. So we're comparing learning Gemara Be'iyun versus saying Tehillim, and there's a clear winner that learning Torah V'iyun is superior to saying Tehillim. And David is asking that could saying Tehillim please be on that level, okay?
So, Rabbi Yeshua, it
Yes.
sounds like he's not suggesting to say Tehillim with dveikus.
When you say Tehillim, you definitely want to say Tehillim with dveikus. But if the whole inyan of Torah Lishma was dveikus, then it wouldn't be better than saying Tehillim. Why is learning Negoim V'Oyalois better than the dveikus you get from saying Tehillim? Right? Lishma ein perusho dveikus. It can't be that Torah Lishma is learning Torah with dveikus. Because if it were, then saying Tehillim with dveikus would be as equal or greater. So it must be, so we haven't said what learning Torah Lishma is, but it's not dveikus. Okay? And we see that learning Torah, be'iyun v'yagia, really sweating it out through difficult Torah study, is something greater and beloved by God more than saying Tehillim, even with dveikus. Okay? That's my understanding. I actually have a couple of notes here. This is really interesting. I actually am. He's gonna comment. This was a request of David, and the question is, was David's request granted? So we're going to see that in a moment. Ve'im nomar shelishma perush dveikus dafka v'rak bezet talui kol ikar inyan esek Torah. If Torah lishma means learning Torah dveikus, halo ein dveikus yoter nifla'a. Mi amirat Tehillim karoi kol hayom. So, Reb Daniel, this is what you were saying, that saying Tehillim is with dveikus. And what could be greater than saying Tehillim with dveikus all day long? That's great. So it must be that learning Torah is something different. It's not the dveikus, okay? And now he makes the point, and who knows? V'gami yodea im hiskim HaKadosh Baruch Hu al yado bezeh. David made this request, but we don't know God's answer. Ki lo matzinu b'divreihem zal, matshuva heshivo hu yitbarach al she'elato. You know, David asked, I'm asking, please let the recitation of Tehillim with dveikus be considered as great as learning Negoim V'Olos, and we don't know the answer to that request. And now, this is so fascinating, we have parentheses here. And so Rabbi Frankel, who put out the English edition, a scholarly edition, he says these parentheses did not appear in the first edition. They appear in the second edition, and they were inserted by Rabbi Yitzhak Balazhaner, the son of the author. And what it says here, Kemo shematzinu baba basra yud zayin amud aleph, ve'idich ahu rachmei hu dekaboy. There's another case where David makes a request of Hashem, and we don't know that he was answered in the affirmative. So David doesn't get everything he wants, which we know from Moshe Rabbeinu, you don't get everything you want, right? V'eschanan el Hashem be'esahi. Moshe Rabbeinu davened 515 prayers, please, please let me go into Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem's answer was no. So even great people, and beloved Avdei Hashem, don't always get a positive answer to their request. So, again, Reb Frankel says, in Baba Basra 17a, what was the issue under discussion? David is not initially listed among the 7 people who did not experience decay of their corpse. As the scriptural source for this possible inclusion was a prayer that this should be the case, i.e., according to the other opinion referenced here, there is no scriptural evidence that David merited this, and that his prayer request was actually granted. The contents of this parentheses did not appear in the first edition and were only introduced seemingly by Rabbi Yitzchak in the second edition. This point that the recitation of Tehillim was not on the same level as Torah study was a contentious point at that historical time and debated heatedly between the Hasidic and Mitnagdic camps. It seems that as a result of this debate, Rabbi Yitzchak felt it was necessary to add this parenthetic proof to back up Reb Chaim's statement that even David HaMelech could make a request that was not necessarily granted. So I think that's really interesting. And again, we could understand a very heated debate between Hasidim and Misnagdim. What should I do in shul all day? And the Hasid, he doesn't have, the Sitzfleisch, and he doesn't have the brains maybe, or the intellectual training or discipline or rigorous logic to engage in Torah study. So he sits there and he says Tehillim all day. And the Baal Shem Tov teaches him that he's beloved by God as much as the Talmidei Chachamim who are learning Gemara. And the Nefesh HaHaim says not necessarily, because learning Torah on a high intellectual level is something really precious. And the point of it is not just dveikus. There's a separate intellectual point, which we're going to see more as we go. Steve?
Where was David coming from on this request? I mean, like, what made him think that they were comparable at all? I just wanted to back up a drop here.
Okay.
I mean, did he really think that racking your brains? I mean, you can rack your brains with either one of those, depending on how poor your Hebrew is. But yeah, what are you going to say?
Well, I think they're two, clearly distinct activities. David he's called, Mishoirer Yisrael. He's a poet of Israel. And David's such a unique individual because he's a warrior and a musician and a poet and a lover and a builder and a conqueror. So David's, I think of him as the ultimate man. And we know that David was given his 70 years of life by Adam Arishon. And so David has this really giant soul that contains really all of the human experience. And he puts all the pain. David has a lot of pain. His kids rebel against him, and there's incest, and there's murder, and there's just such a mess in his household. So he's been through a real lot of stuff.
And nationally, isn't that when the split came?
No, David's really the united monarchy begins.
Oh no, he pulled them together. Sorry.
Yes, That's okay. David puts it together. Shaul had, the Benjaminites, etc. David puts it all together. Solomon continues that, and then it's in Solomon's son Rehovam's time that it splits. So David is a builder. He's an empire builder. He's been through everything in his life. He's been on the run for his life from Shaul, from Absalom. And he captures all the pain of human existence, the self-doubt. Think of the words kol ha'adam kozev. Everybody's full of it. Everybody's disappointing. So he captures what I'll call the human experience to a great degree in the difficult words. I agree it's difficult poetry sometimes to understand what's going on in Tehillim, but there's just a storm of feeling in his words. And the one constant through all of Tehillim is God is always there for you. God is your refuge, and he will not let you down. And he's the emes, and he's the one firm thing that a person has to hold on to, because you can lose everything else, but you don't need to lose your relationship to God. So that's a very powerful idea. So that dveikus, that clinging to God through thick and thin, through good and bad, through life and death experiences, sickness and everything that David deals with, that's really powerful. So David's praying to God, if a person will recite my Tehillim with dveikus, let that be equivalent to a person who's learning God's will, who's learning the laws.
So Tehillim, you're not on cruise control either.
No, you gotta really feel it. You gotta get into it. Okay. V'gam ki hayadai le'inyan adveikus b'meseches achas o perek o mishnah achat she'yasok ba kol yamav b'dveikus. If the point of Torah Lishma was to develop a closeness to God, dveikus, so you could learn one Masechta your whole life, or even one chapter, or even one Mishnah, she'yasok ba kol yamav, and think how deep you'll get and how much you'll know it by heart and how much feeling you'll have in this one Mishnah, this one chapter of Gemara that you learn your whole life. V'lo chen matzinu lirazal. And that's not exactly what Chazal told us to do. She'amru al Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, shelo heniach mikre mishne halachos v'agadois. The Gemara praises Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai for his breadth of knowledge. He learned all the psukim and all the mishnayos and all the halachas and all the haggados, everything there is to know. So there's a pursuit of knowledge, not just going over and over the same material. So there's clearly like an acquisition of knowledge that's part of the objective of Torah Lishma. B'hainu, ki mehaloiso alibo tamid, ki adayin lo yatsa yedei chovato ve'esek haTorah lishma, v'ma shelamad ata. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is all the time learning more and more because he feels he hasn't yet fulfilled his obligation of Torah Lishma. Lezot haya shoked kol yamav lahosif lekach tamid miyom liyom umisha'a l'sha'a. So far, what we would say, it's an acquisition of knowledge that it looks like. He is dedicated and diligent in his studies every day and every hour to learn more and more. So that's more in the direction of Torah Lishma. Uve mishle rabta perish ba'urei kama koshe yom hadin she'atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu ladun et kol ha'olam kulo. It's talking about the day of judgment in the future. And listen what they say to you on the day of judgment. Ba mi sheyesh biyado mikra. A person steps up to judgment and he's learned, he knows the Bible really well. Ve'ein biyado mishnah, but he doesn't know the mishnayos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hofech et panav mimenu umitzayrei gehino mitgavrim bo v'chulei. So the fact that you learn Bible is great, but why didn't you learn mishnayos? You're in trouble because you didn't learn mishnayos. And they throw him down into Gehenna because he doesn't know mishnayos. Okay? Ba mi sheyesh biyado shnei starim o shlosha. This guy knows 2 sidrei mishnah, maybe even 3. HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar le b'ni kol halachot lama lo shanita otam. Yeah, you learn nashim v'dezikim, but why didn't you learn kachim v'taharos? So Hashem does not accept that he only knows some of the curriculum. Ba mi sheyesh biyado halachos. Comes a third guy and he knows a lot of halachas. Amar le b'ni torat kohanim lama lo shanita sheyesh bo kama halachot. You didn't learn about korbanos. Ba mi sheyesh biyado toras kohanim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar le b'ni chamishe chumshei Torah lama lo shanita. Here it goes backwards. This guy knows the midrashim and the halachas, but he doesn't know chumash. So Hashem is not happy with that either. Sheyesh b'hem kriyat shma tefillin u'mezuzah. Ba mi sheyesh biyado chamisha chumshei Torah amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu lama lo lamata Haggadah. You didn't learn the Haggadic passages. Ba mi sheyesh biyado Haggadah HaKadosh Baruch Hu le b'ni Talmud lo lamata. Why didn't you learn the Gemaras? Ba mi sheyesh biyado Talmud HaKadosh Baruch Hu le b'ni Hoyel v'nitasakta b'Talmud sipita b'mirkava. Okay, this guy comes with Talmud study, and so Hashem says to him, he says, you involved yourself with the derivation of Torah Shebal Peh. Did you learn Ma'aseh Merkava? Okay, nitasakta b'Talmud sipita b'merkava. Like, did you learn Kabbalah? Kisei kavod heachu omed. Did you learn how my kisei kavod is suspended in space? Chashmal heachu omed. Do you know how chashmal works? Chashmal is like spiritual energy. Uvikama panim umisapech ayin sham ba'oirech. So it's a very, very beautiful midrash, sort of scary, where in Midas Hadin, in the day of judgment, whatever you have, it's sort of not enough. You have to, really have everything. Okay, there's such a thing as the divine attribute of justice. And so it's going to be critical. But the point here is there is an expectation of the Jew from the vantage point of the Midat Hadin to learn all of the Torah, not just, one part of it or certain parts of it, but you gotta expose yourself to all this different information. Steve?
That's funny. I heard this morning. It's in today's Daf.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Kind of weird. I hadn't heard it. Today I heard it twice.
Okay. Nice.
Funny.
So the Nefesh
I'm guilty of a lot of those things.
Well, I know. I think you made a Siyum Shas on Daf Yomi, so that's in your favor, Baruch Hashem. Umistabra nami hachi, and it makes sense that you're supposed to, learn a lot of varied information. Sharei kama halachos merubois yesh b'shas, shebe'et asher adam osek behem, hu tzarich le'ayen ula'amik machshavto v'sichlo b'inyanei hagashmius shebehem. This is a really nice idea. In order to understand the Gemara, you got to know what it's talking about. Whether it's talking about the laws of weaving, or the laws of buying and selling, or the laws of stealing and paying kefil, you have to involve yourself very much in worldly transaction and in gashmistic things. You have to understand the world that we live in. And for us, because we're living 2,000 years after the Mishnah, a lot of times we have to go back historically. How did they used to do things in order for us to understand, let's say, the malachas of Shabbos? Today, a lot of the malachas are done with the combine, but it used to be the katsira and the dash and the zoira were different malachas. So you got to understand gashmius in order to understand halacha. And when you're learning gashmius, you're not thinking about God, you're thinking about gashmius. So that's the case he's building now, that learning Torah Lishma doesn't mean to be clinging to God. It means to understand the material. Shimon?
Is the ideal or the practical ideal, not the esoteric ideal, to be a jack of all trades, master at none, or to be master of one? I'm trying to mefiket lekach here. We can't do everything, but are we supposed to vary balance the portfolio? Spread it out, or
I actually
a little chumash, a little this,
I think Chazal have that statement that Adam yishalesh v'shinamtem, al tikri v'shinamtem shilashtem, shlish b'mikra, shlish b'mishnah, shlish b'talmud. So that implies that, jack of all trades. The Torah Lemaisa, we know the Shas. We know that a person can make Siyum Shas in 7.5 years and so forth. And so I think there is a goal for a person to master all of the material of the Shas, but also to, aspire to learning a little bit of Kabbalah without giving up on knowing the Psukim very well. So I think that, you do have to listen to your inner voice. And Chazal say that Ein Adam Loimed Ela Ma Shelibo Chafetz. You have to learn what you love. So a person should learn what they love. But I do think there is a goal to master different aspects of the Torah.
So our salad approach in Kollel is good.
Yeah, that's why I do it, right? I learned this stuff already. So yes, I believe that's desirable. So he's talking about when you're actually learning Gemara, you're thinking very much this worldly. It's almost not a religious study. It's much more a legalistic, an intellectual study, which includes a mastery of Gashmius, Kagon, Kinim, Pischei Nida, Shehein Hein Gufei Halachas. You have to understand women's biology and menstruation and all different stuff. Oh, Masomaten B'Shas, all the laws of doing business. Klale Dine Migo, which is about, Rama'ut, how liars think and, how liars lie and so forth. Shahaya haramai yachol liton. So is that a religious thought to think about how liars lie? V'kimat bilti afshar she'etzlo az gam hadvekus b'shleimus karaoi. So he claims it's almost impossible that while you're thinking about how liars lie, that you'll also at the same moment be entirely clinging to kuchabrichu. You'll be in the upper realms of dvekus b'Hashem, right? They're two different things. I think we all understand that. Okay, that's the end of his parak. So let me begin the next parak. Because here's where he gives us the answer. Avala emeski inyan lishma. So what is lishma? We've proven that it's not dvekus. Ala emeski inyan lishma perish l'shem haTorah. This word lishma, of course, has a mapik hey, right? Lishma, for its name. And its name, whose name? Its name, the Torah's name. Learning Torah, l'shem Torah. Perush l'shem haTorah. We're learning Torah for the sake of the Torah. Okay? Va'inyan k'moshe perush harosh zal amayim Rav Elazar Tzadok aseh dvarim l'shem po'alam v'daber behen lishman. So he quotes a Rush, and he says, do things for the sake of their maker, for the Holy One, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, did all of it for his own sake. Daber ben, speak in them lishman. Aseh dvarim l'shem po'alan lishmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shepa'al hakol lema'anehu. Hashem created everything, quote, for his own sake. Okay? V'daber behen lishman kol diburcha umas'acha v'divrei Torah yeh l'shem haTorah. Kigon, what does it mean, l'shem haTorah? Leda, lehavin, lohoisif lekach, v'pilpul, v'lo lekanter v'lehidgaot. And it looks like this is all a quote from the Rush. That's what I think. So what did he say lishma means? L'shem haTorah, to know, to understand, to increase material, mastery, understanding, pilpul, to put it together, analyze it, and cross-reference it. And what you should not do is lekanter. Okay, what should I say lekanter? It has to do with the English word contrarian, but here it's in a very negative way of trying to show the Torah is wrong or outdated or old-fashioned or something like that.
The naged.
Let's see what he says. To provoke others. Yeah, I'm learning so that I'll know more than you and I can prove that you're wrong and I'm right. Some people do learn like that, and that's not a good way to learn. And the last one is narcissistically, egotistically, which, again, people do this. People learn Torah shelo lishma. And we have a halacha mitoich shelo lishma, balishma. And, my sons are in yeshiva, and these are 18, 19-year-old boys. They are very competitive. So a lot of their learning is for sure to be better than the other guy, and maybe to get a better shidduch, which is more money or a bigger dira. So there's all sorts of ulterior motives for learning Torah. So we're trying to focus, okay, that's easy to understand, that's Torah shelo lishma, but what exactly is Torah lishma? So here we have words, leda, lahavin, lahoisiv lekach, upilpul, v'lo lekanter v'lehidkaot, ad kan leshono, v'dikteg levoyer shine leshoino, the Roosevelt Tzadok, shebe'asiya amar l'shem po'alan, u'bedibur amar lishman. Lachein be'inyan ha'asiyah, the things you do, you should do l'shem Hashem. But the words that you say of Torah should be l'shem, the words themselves. Lachein be'inyan ha'asiyah pirush lishmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shepo'al hakol lema'anehu, ube'inyan halimud piresh l'shem haTorah. So Torah lishma means learning Torah l'shem haTorah. And I heard a mashal once. We'll see more about it. I'm going to close with this mashal this evening. Reb Shlomo Fisher said, imagine that a Kadosh Baruch Hu has a factory and he owns the factory and the product is Divrei Torah. And we are, not only are we employees in the factory, but we're shareholders. We're shareholders and we're employees in the business, the family business owned by Kadosh Baruch Hu of Divrei Torah. And so every Dvar Torah that we say, every pasuk, every word of Torah, every ois of Torah is product. We are producing something. We are bringing an influx of divine energy into the universe. We are connecting ourselves to God and his infinite greatness and bringing it more into this world. That is a result of Limud Torah. There is Dveikus, which is created through Limud Torah. But the point of the Limud Torah is to understand the Torah and to master it and to increase the depth of our penetrating analysis of it and to capture the breadth of the intellectual disciplines of all the Torah. So that's what we learned tonight. Ezrat Hashem, we should continue to learn Torah. Halavai lishma, mitok shelo lishma, bal lishma. We'll continue to learn for whatever reason, but we will aspire to learn Torah lishma. I'm wishing everybody a Gemar Chasima Tova. I hope to get together next Monday too, Bezrat Hashem. So,
Gemar Chasima Tova.
Call to good night to everybody.
Thank you.
Tov.